Rhiannon is a shy and overlooked receptionist at a local newspaper. She feels trapped in her life and deeply resents everyone around her, though she's too scared to act on her anger. People mistreat her constantly, her boss and co-workers are rude, strangers are annoying, her estranged sister never responds to her messages, and her former high school bully, Julia, left her with a hair-pulling disorder that forced her to wear a wig. The only bright spot in her life is her hospitalized father, who encourages her to stand up for herself. One night when she visits him, her father suffers a coughing fit. Rhiannon hesitates to ask a busy nurse for help, and he dies. She blames herself. At his funeral, things worsen. Her sister, Sharon, arrives late and barely interacts with her. Craig, a co-worker and former one-night stand, ignores her. The funeral host mispronounces her name, and Julia shows up with her old clique, acting as if she doesn't recognize Rhiannon. Sharon, meanwhile, is friendly with Julia and tells Rhiannon to stop acting awkward. At a gathering afterward, Rhiannon's aunt mistakes her for the waiter, and Craig brush-offs her to check on Julia instead. Sharon then announces her plan to sell their family home and split the money so she can buy a house in France. To make matters worse, Julia is handling the sale. Sharon dismisses Rhiannon's trauma and tells her to get over the bullying. Later, Rhiannon looks up Julia online and sees she's now a successful realtor with a happy family, contrast to Rhiannon's lonely life. The next morning, Rhiannon finds her wig, triggering painful memories of her past. She tries to focus on work after her 10-day leave for the funeral, but no one in the office acknowledges her comeback. Her boss, Norman, mistreats her as usual, throwing his coat on her head. Determined to change her situation, Rhiannon tells Norman she wants to apply for the junior reporter position, something he once suggested she could aspire to. He calls her a sweet pea and says she's too timid for the role. When she promises to learn, he dismisses Rhiannon and tells her to throw her resume in the trash on her way out. Frustrated, Rhiannon vents by cutting paper with a knife. Just then, a young man named AJ arrives at the office. He's kind to her, but Rhiannon quickly discovers he's been given the junior reporter job because his mother knows Norman. Overwhelmed by jealousy and anger, Rhiannon follows AJ and plans to kill him. However, she accidentally holds the blade and cut herself. Startles AJ. She quickly makes up an excuse that she follows him to give him the new employee form to fill out. AJ asks if he took the job she wanted. Rhiannon denies it, awkwardly hiding the knife under her foot. After that, Rhiannon returns home and takes her dog for a walk. Sharon texts her again, pressuring her to move forward with the house sale. While out, Rhiannon passes a large billboard of Julia's smiling face advertising her real estate business. The sight of Julia overwhelms her with anxiety, and she starts pulling at her hair. Distracted, she doesn't notice her dog running into the road, where it's struck and killed by a passing car. Heartbroken, Rhiannon buries her dog in the backyard. Fueled by alcohol, she finally gathers the courage to leave Sharon a voicemail, saying she's lost everything and can't lose the house too, especially if it means dealing with Julia. Determined, she decides to attend the class reunion and confront her old bully. At the reunion, Julia first pretends to be confused, acting like she doesn't understand Rhiannon's accusations. Then she turns cruel, calling Rhiannon obsessed and delusional. Julia claims all of Rhiannon's problems are her own fault. Surrounded by Julia's friends, Rhiannon is flooded with painful memories of prom night when Julia ripped off her wig in front of everyone. Overwhelmed, she starts pulling at her hair again. Julia smirks and asks if she's doing it again, revealing she remembers everything but was pretending to be innocent. The group corners Rhiannon, laughing as Julia tells everyone she's just a lonely woman blaming others for her misery. Feeling invisible and humiliated, Rhiannon leaves the bar. Strangers bump into her on the way out, as if she doesn't exist. In the pouring rain, she hides under a bridge, holding her late father's knife and thinking about his advice to stand up for herself. A drunk man stumbles under the bridge to pee and accidentally urinates on her. When he notices, he laughs it off, saying he didn't see her, and keeps going. Her anger boils over, and she kicks him. The man becomes aggressive and threatens her. In a rage, Rhiannon slashes his shirt with the knife. When he moves to attack her, she stabs him in the neck before he can do anything. Afterward, she pushes his body into the river and keeps the knife as she walks home. On the way, she notices people stepping aside to let her pass, finally acknowledging her presence. At home, she stares and screams into the mirror. The next morning, Rhiannon wakes up feeling unusually good until she notices the strangulation marks on her neck and remembers what happened the night before. Panicking, she throws her bloody clothes into the washing machine. The doorbell rings, and it's Craig, who says he's interested in buying her dad's construction business. He compliments her hair, and Rhiannon feels flattered, but her mood shifts when she remembers the bloody knife she still needs to clean. On the bus to work, the route passes the bridge where she killed the man, and her feel uneasy. At the office, AJ makes her tea, but she dismisses him as a creep. Norman gathers the team to discuss the day's headlines, but no one has anything sensational to report. Then Jeff, a reporter, bursts in with news of a body found by the canal. Norman praises Jeff, and AJ volunteers to ask his friend who lives near the river for more information. Feeling envious, Rhiannon chimes in that it's clearly a murder, but Norman brushes her off and assigns Jeff and AJ to the story instead. The victim was stabbed 14 times, and everyone speculates that the killer must be a monster and that it's gang-related, though no DNA was found at the scene. Rhiannon feels restless hearing this and sneaks into Jeff's desk to read his notes. AJ catches her in the act but assumes she's just curious and shaken by the gruesome case. Rhiannon browses the internet and finds that everyone feels sorry for the victim and berates the killer. Jeff calls the office, and Rhiannon learns the victim's name is Ryan. He doesn't have the address yet, but Rhiannon figures it out. She takes the chance to convince Norman to let her interview Ryan's family. Norman agrees but makes AJ come with her. AJ can tell Rhiannon is uncomfortable and tries to talk to her. She tells him that she's still mourning, so it feels strange to question a grieving family. Rhiannon confesses she feels angry all the time. To cheer her up, AJ shares a story about breaking his toe by kicking a wall after his grandmother passed away. At the Lloyd's house, the family speaks only good things about their son, then mentioning an argument he had at work with a colleague. Overwhelmed by his photos, she excuses herself to the bathroom but notices his bedroom. She sneaks inside and finds a restraining order filed against Ryan. She rushes to get AJ, and they leave the house together. They go to meet the colleague, Dave, and learn that Ryan had bullied him so severely that Dave was fired and had to file the restraining order. Now, Rhiannon feels less guilty about killing Ryan and comforts Dave, saying that Ryan can't hurt him anymore. AJ isn't sure they should go in that direction for their report, but Rhiannon thinks it will be unique and attract a lot of viewers if they point out that the victim was a bully who somewhat deserved it. Just then, she receives the news that Julia is coming to her home to evaluate the house. Rhiannon rushes home and frantically cleans up all traces of blood just before Julia arrives with her colleague, Stella. Julia mocks Rhiannon here and there, but her final comment about needing hair plugins crosses the line. Furious, Rhiannon goes back to work and pitches the story framing Ryan as a bully. Norman approves it but lets Jeff write the story since he was assigned the case. Still, Rhiannon gets credit for her input and, for the first time, is invited to an office gathering at a karaoke bar. At the bar, Rhiannon stands her ground and refuses Craig's repeated offers to buy her dad's business. She even gets on stage to sing Roar, but her performance is interrupted when police arrive to question everyone about the murder. She hides in the bathroom and notices graffiti insulting Ryan. The sight reassures her, and she no longer feels guilty. Confidently, she walks past the police. A cop stops her, making her heart skip a beat, but it turns out he's just reminding her to be careful walking at night. Outside, Rhiannon sees a rude customer and recognizes him as the man who caused a scene at the hospital, delaying the nurse from helping her dying father. She follows him into an alley and calls out to him for help. When he comes close, she stabs him. After finishing, she walks home and smiles evilly at a poster of Julia. The next morning, Rhiannon visits the alley and sees that the second man's body is still there. A flashback to high school shows how Julia bullied her, making her feel suicidal. Back in the present, Rhiannon stalks Julia, resenting her perfect life. She watches crime thrillers and takes notes, planning to make Julia pay for her past actions. She runs into Craig, who apologizes for his previous rudeness. He offers to help with her dad's construction business. Taking a chance, she asks him out to dinner under the guise of business, and he agrees. Later, while buying groceries, a rude cashier triggers her. Rhiannon drops the cashier's phone into her drink. The next day, she calls Julia. Despite her nervousness, they agree to meet the next evening for house photos. Excited, Rhiannon buys pastries and coffee for her co-workers. However, when she realizes Jeff hasn't credited her for the Ryan Lloyd story, she adds laxatives to his drink. She almost gets caught by AJ, who flirts with her, which she actually enjoys. Soon, Ryan's mother arrives, scolding AJ and Rhiannon for writing negative things about her son. Jeff defends them, but Rhiannon speaks up, saying Ryan was a bully and deserved it. Everyone thinks she's overreacting, except for AJ, who checks on her. Later, her mood gets better when Jeff spends all his day in the bathroom. After work, Rhiannon puts on makeup for her date, which AJ notices. He attempts to ask her out, but she declines, leaving him feeling awkward. At the restaurant, Craig is late and only wants to discuss business. She changes the topic, and they eventually have a good time and hook up later that night. However, the next morning, the police call her in as a witness to a murder that occurred at a club. The police don't suspect her, especially after learning about her father's death and her dog's recent passing. Seeing their sympathy, Rhiannon lies, claiming she saw a group of men fighting at the club, potentially connected to the murder. The sergeant is called away by his boss, who ignores the second detective, Marina. Rhiannon sympathizes with Marina about her mistreatment by her boss. Marina, in turn, recalls Rhiannon's karaoke performance. The police discover the second body, and Rhiannon is dismissed. Nervous, she cancels her plans with Julia and goes to work. AJ notices she's still wearing the same clothes from the previous day. Norman and others at the office discuss the newly discovered body. Jeff receives information from the police, learning that both victims were killed with the same weapon. Once again, no evidence is found at the crime scene. That evening, Rhiannon texts Craig to hang out, but he declines, claiming he has a client. Rhiannon decides to go to Craig's anyway, only to find that the client is Julia. They are flirting with each other, and Julia reveals her true intention. She wants to buy Rhiannon's house and flip it. Enraged, Rhiannon steals Julia's phone and punctures her car tire. She waits in her truck, and when Craig leaves, she offers Julia a ride as she struggles with her car. Rhiannon takes Julia to her place, claiming there's mold in the garage that Julia should check out. In the basement, Julia looks around, confused. Rhiannon confesses to killing the men because they were bullies. Julia thinks it's about the house and tells Rhiannon to keep it. Rhiannon demands an apology for the bullying she endured in high school, but Julia refuses. As Julia tries to run away, she slips and falls. Rhiannon takes advantage of the opportunity and knocks her out. As Rhiannon looks down at Julia's unconscious body, Julia's eyes suddenly snap open. Detective Marina Farrow also has a list of people she'd like to kill. From her annoying landlady who turns off her hot water to her co-workers who bully her and make her work overtime. At the top of her list are murderers who think they can get away with it. Meanwhile, Rhiannon ties up Julia and taunts her. But Julia tells Rhiannon to move on from the bullying. Frustrated, Rhiannon tries to kill her but can't bring herself to do it. She runs out, only to be called a loser by Julia, and her hair starts falling out again. Rhiannon goes to the construction office and has it rough with Craig, who starts to fall for her. Afterward, she kicks him out and steals the CCTV footage that shows her kidnapping Julia. On the bus, a man spreads his legs too wide, so she gropes him, and he quickly moves to another seat. At work, Rhiannon demands that Norman make her a junior reporter, offering a big story in exchange. Jeff is against it, but Norman agrees to a trial period after she reveals a possible third victim linked to a kidnapping case. AJ is happy for her, and they exchange playful banter. He suggests that the second victim, a known exploitative landlord, might have been killed by a vigilante. Rhiannon smiles at the idea and tells him to watch for a third murder. Meanwhile, at the police station, Marina tries to stand up for herself but is quickly shut down by her boss. He tells her to focus on Rhiannon's suspect list and piles more work on her. Meanwhile, Rhiannon reaches out to one of Julia's minions, Lucille, to create a source for her missing persons story. She meets with Julia's friends but is frustrated that they have no enemies or stressful situations that could be linked to the kidnapping. One of the girls even sympathizes with her past bullying and says she turned out just fine. Rhiannon pretends it wasn't a big deal and they ask to hang out with her. Marina keeps watching the CCTV footage and spots Julia pushing Rhiannon. She tracks Rhiannon's movements and notices she left at 9:30 p.m., contradicting her statement claiming she left at 11 p.m. and stayed late. Marina starts to suspect Rhiannon and tries to reach Julia but fails. Meanwhile, Rhiannon visits Julia's fiance, Marcus. Frustrated that they didn't have any conflict and that Marcus seems totally in love with Julia, she asks him to find her a photo of Julia for her article about Julia's disappearance. She uses the opportunity to steal a wine bottle and Julia's top. She even pours tea on their chair out of pettiness. Her story is published, and she and AJ celebrate. However, Saren's call interrupts her. Saren reveals that she sent a surveyor to the house to finish the job because Julia is unreachable. Ranan rushes over and kicks him out, insisting the house isn't for sale. She then puts on Julia's top and goes to the basement to brag to Julia about her new achievement. But Julia isn't impressed, insulting Rhiannon's appearance. Rhiannon decides to change. Later, she goes to a bar with AJ. They're having fun until Craig shows up and acts like he's her boyfriend. AJ feels awkward and leaves. Rhiannon tries to follow him, but he ignores her. Outside, she sees Marcus drunk and offers to give him a ride home. A drunk Marcus reveals that Julia doesn't love him. Excited to see a hint of conflict, Rhiannon goes through his phone and finally finds something useful. Rhiannon goes back and reads all the messages Marcus sent Julia calling her abusive. Rhiannon is initially satisfied she's not the only one has witnessed Julia's horrible nature. However, it turns out that Marcus is the abusive one, and Julia starts crying. Marina receives a call from her boss scolding her for not having the report on Julia's missing case yet while there's already an article about it. Marina checks the article and learns it's written by Rhiannon. At the police station, Marina tells her boss that she believes Rhiannon is the killer. The boss dismisses her idea and thinks Marcus is the suspect instead because he was also at the karaoke bar when the second victim, Mike, was murdered. Meanwhile, AJ stops by to check on Rhiannon, who has taken a sick day to deal with Julia. Since he thinks Rhiannon is with Craig, he acts awkward around her. Julia breaks something in the house, and AJ thinks it's Craig, so he leaves. Rhiannon comes back in and finds that Julia has stolen the scissors from the table. They fight, and Rhiannon finally knocks Julia out. Just then, she realizes Julia is on her period, so she puts her in the bathtub. Here, Julia shows Rhiannon the mark on her neck from one of the many times Marcus hurt her when she tried to leave him. They talk more, and Julia eventually apologizes to Rhiannon and admits that she was a jerk. She just didn't have a loving family, so she took it out on Rhiannon, who had a loving dad, but she still thinks that Rhiannon is responsible for her current miserable life. Meanwhile, Marina gets news of Julia's car and finds it at the construction shop owned by Rhiannon. She looks for the CCTV footage but finds it missing. Craig will be questioned by the police, and he informs Rhiannon about it. That night, they have a date. And Julia offers to do Rhiannon's makeup. Julia recalls how controlling Marcus was, always making sure she had makeup on when she was outside. She gets a chance to stab Rhiannon in the eye with an eyeliner pencil, but she doesn't. Somehow, with that, Julia starts to gain Rhiannon's trust. At the date, the food Craig made is terrible, but Rhiannon kisses him anyway and asks him to lie for her, saying she wasn't at the store that night. The next day at work, Norman puts Rhiannon and AJ on the same search party reporting team. People notice something between them, and Jeff teases them. Then he tells Rhiannon he has some dirt on her from Marcus. Marina tells her colleague she thinks Rhiannon killed her dad and is the culprit of all 3 murders. Her boss is annoyed and tells her she's being useless to the team with her crazy ideas and should focus on her tasks instead. A big search party is held for Julia. Marina talks to Julia's friends and learns about Rhiannon and Julia's history. Marina asks Rhiannon about it when she's with AJ. Rhiannon starts to get nervous and pulls her hair. Rhiannon also gets an angry text from Saren, saying she's coming back to sort out the house herself. Rhiannon is suddenly pulled aside by Marcus, who threatens her about vandalizing and stealing from his house. AJ spots them and asks why she didn't tell him about her connection to Julia. Overwhelmed, she snaps at him and calls him obsessed. She runs off before AJ can tell her that he likes her. Rhiannon follows Marcus outside and is about to stab him when Jeff sees her and realizes she's the killer. She chases him, but he's hit by a car. Scared, she's about to throw away the knife when Marcus threatens her with a text. She gets an idea and tells Julia they can frame Marcus for the murders. This way, they can both escape. Meanwhile, Marina questions Craig and is surprised to learn Rhiannon might be selling her house to her bully. She senses something is wrong when he hesitates to cover for Rhiannon about the night she visited him and Julia. Marina calls her colleagues and heads to Rhiannon's house. The colleague thinks it's a bad idea and stops her from sneaking in. Meanwhile, Rhiannon and Julia break in Julia's new apartment to set up the trap. The alarm brings Marcus over. Their plan is to tie Julia to the radiator, get Marcus to cut her free with the knife, and then Rhiannon will call the police to frame Marcus as the killer. As planned, Marcus shows up and frees Julia. Rhiannon calls the police but stops when Marcus starts to get jealous, thinking Julia hooked up with the kidnapper. He starts choking her, and Rhiannon tells him to stop. Encouraged, Julia announces she's leaving him. Marcus emotionally blackmails her by pretending to kill himself. Rhiannon pushes him for real. The police arrive and see Julia and Rhiannon standing over Marcus's dead body. The police take in Rhiannon and Julia for questioning. Rhiannon is worried about what Julia might say. The police interrogate Rhiannon and Julia separately. However, both Rhiannon and Julia stick to the story that Marcus kidnapped Julia. Rhiannon investigated him, found Julia, he threatened them both, and then he slipped and died. The DI believes the story and is annoyed at Marina for pushing the theory that Rhiannon is the killer. Rhiannon is doing well until Marina taunts her about how Julia bullied and mistreated her. Rhiannon gets nervous and snaps, pulling her hair and claiming that she saved Julia. Luckily, the DI sides with her and sends Marina away. Julia and Rhiannon are free to go. Craig picks up Rhiannon, and they stop by Julia's place, but reporters are swarming. AJ is also present and hugs Rhiannon, glad she's okay. She apologizes for being rude to him, and he confesses that he likes her. She's touched, but they're interrupted by Craig. Rhiannon arrives home to find her dad's ashes have been delivered. Julia shows up and is upset that Rhiannon killed her fiance. Rhiannon promises not to kill anymore and says it's a good thing that Marcus is dead. Julia is convinced, and they're excited that they're free. They party at a club, but Julia continues to miss Marcus. Rhiannon convinces her that to move on, she should tell her story in the Gazette. Julia still isn't comfortable with Rhiannon, who jokes about killing a drug dealer. To forget, Julia asks Rhiannon for her bank card to buy drugs. They get high and make out with Craig. Upset, Marina tears down Julia's missing posters. While Rhiannon is out, Marina sneaks into her house. She finds the CCTV footage of the night of the kidnapping, showing Rhiannon slashing Julia's tire. After the party, Rhiannon and Julia head to the roof to watch the sunrise, and the girls have a tender moment as Rhiannon scatters her dad's ashes and is glad that she is standing up for herself like he wanted. She sees that she has texted AJ that she likes him, and he texts back that he likes her too. Happy, she even asks Julia to move in with her, but Julia doesn't give her an answer. Rhiannon returns home and finds Mariana there. The latter confront her, but Rhiannon knows she can't use the footage as an evidence since she broke in Rhiannon's house to get it. But Mariana believes that Rhiannon will commit crime again, and when it happens this time she will get caught. Later, Julia goes to the Gazette and recounts a day as a hostage. She describes all the things Rhiannon did to her and comments that she understands that hurt people hurt people. Both Rhiannon and Julia feels nervous recalling that. Julia quickly rushes out, promising that she will come over to Rhiannon's that night. Rhiannon then breaks up with Craig, but he threatens to tell the cops about her visit unless she hands over the company to him. She is angry but then agrees. That night, AJ is the person that shows up at Rhiannon's door. She tells him she broke up with Craig and they end up sleeping together. The next morning, Julia ghosts Rhiannon and uses her card to pay €500. Rhiannon is worried, but AJ reassures her that Julia probably needs some space. AJ then gets a tip from his first police contact about the murder weapon, and it turns out to be a photo of Rhiannon's knife. AJ recognizes it from the first day at work when she used it to cut open envelopes. He is in disbelief, looking for it but finding it nowhere. Rhiannon confesses everything to him. She shares that she just wants to be seen and promises not to kill again, as he is now there for her. But he calls her a monster and tries to leave. In trying to make him stay, she stabs him in the rib and neck. As she holds his dying body, she insists that she is not a monster. Saren arrives at the doorstep and calls out to Rhiannon.
Thank you for watching. Subscribe and like for more videos like this.